It was a lot, and I just found that I wasn't coping. I was shutting down, I was lashing out. I think anger was the one thing that manifested in my process of dealing with stuff. I was very angry.
Just through going through depression and anxiety and being in a really dark place, I blacked out. I actually blacked out a whole time. I don't know why I can't have the same memories that I had before. So I suppose I grieve that.
I think with me, I had to shut people out.
Yeah.
Just because I was receiving a lot of toxic positivity, and that's a thing that people are not aware of because it's coming from a good place, but it's so unhelpful. I know everything's going to be okay. I don't need you to tell me. Whatever scripture you're going to read to me, I already know, but it's not resonating with me right now.
Do it again. Yeah. And I think sometimes we think, okay, it's okay. We can just remember the times God's come through and that'll give us faith.
It'll keep you going.
Yeah, but then sometimes it's like, yeah, but I know what you can do, so why is he not doing it right now?
Asking for help was foreign to me. You could ask me for help. I'm the helper, I always help you. But to ask for help, it meant I was doing something wrong. So it was so foreign to me.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Magnify Conversations. If you're new to Magnify, firstly, welcome. It's great to have you. Magnify is a platform focused on empowering ambitious women of faith to thrive in every area of our lives. I don't know about you, but I sometimes find faith can be really challenging and difficult to speak about in today's world. And that's why we've created this podcast.
The Magnify Conversations are all about bringing everyday, authentic women together to discuss faith, relationships, career, whatever's kind of important we're speaking about at the moment.
My name is Ruth, and I'm the founder and CEO of Magnify.
And I'm Rachel, and I'll be the host of the Magnify Conversations.
So if you like this episode, don't forget to share with a friend, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. We're so excited to have you here. My name's Rachel, and I'm the host of the Magnify Conversations, and I'm thrilled to introduce Abi McIlrath, who will be hosting this special episode today. Abi was involved with the Magnify vision right back in its early years, so we're so happy to have her back with us today.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to be here and to have this conversation together. So why don't we get started? Today, we're having a candid conversation about mental health with guests Imelda Ladebo and Rachel Calland. Imelda is a qualified professional makeup artist, and she specialises in commercial, film, bridal, fashion, and editorial makeup. Rachel is a church leader in Greater Manchester and the host of the Magnify Conversations here at Magnify. So it's time to get into our conversation. So today we're going to be having a conversation around mental health. We're so glad that you guys are here. We're going to share. So to kick off, can you, Imelda, tell us personally why it is important for you to have this conversation?
I think having this conversation is important because when I was going through my mental health phase, I call it, it was really difficult finding a community, especially because it was in lockdown. It was quite hard to have conversations like this that I could reach out to either via YouTube or podcasts and just know that I wasn't alone or I wasn't going through it alone, or just find someone to be like, oh, I resonate with that. It was really hard, not gonna lie, I had to dig deep. My therapist helped with that. So eventually I got there, but just, it's not easily accessible, I find. And I think having more open and vulnerable conversations about mental health is important because a lot of people are going through it. And we just need that community sometimes online to feel less isolated. So, yeah.
Amazing. Rachel, what about you? Why is it important to you personally to have this conversation?
I feel like people talk about mental health a lot, which is great in terms of you can dig about and find it. I know what you're saying, Imelda, personally having those conversations is much harder. But if you go online, you can find so many things. But I think for me, when I was struggling with my own mental health in quite a more serious way, I'd been used to being the strong person. I'm the big sister. I've got 3 younger sisters. So I was kind of the one who looks after everyone else. So I think for me, especially with the Magnify Conversations, to have a conversation where it's mental health doesn't discriminate. You can kind of go through a dark phase no matter who you are, where you live, what you have, what you don't have. So that's why it's important to me, because for me, that was a big part of my shame, I think, going through it. So, yeah.
We are really looking forward to having this conversation, and I'd love to hear a bit more about your story and kind of the events maybe surrounding a time in your life that you struggled with mental health. Rachel, do you want to start and tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah, I mean, with the knowledge I've got now, I feel like maybe I'd struggled with mental health before, but just not really understood, or I just always thought my mind's an interesting place. You know, that's like the kind way of saying it. When I think back to being a teenager and in my early 20s, I'm nearly in my mid-30s now, but in my early 20s, I remember just struggling emotionally, and that with my thinking, I feel like my thoughts were overwhelming. And in the same way, I'd be like, actually, my mind's a creative place. I feel like I have a great way of thinking. It was almost like Jekyll and Hyde, two sides of my mind. So I probably struggled a little bit before, but in 2017, it was quite a significant year. So I was pregnant with mine and my husband's first child, and there was a lot of anticipation and excitement, but at the same time, quite a few just life challenges. So we'd made the decision to move house. We chose a doer-upper. I don't know why. I'm not sure that was a wise decision. My husband was struggling at work, and so we were having a bit of a friendship breakdown with some of our friends as well, which was really tough. And then we had the amazing privilege. I gave birth to my daughter. She arrived like safely, and that was amazing. I was thrilled to be a mom, but quite quickly I was struggling. And I think naturally, I'd never been someone who was like, I'm living to like get married and have kids. So it was a privilege that I've been able to do that, but it wasn't my only goal and ambition in life. So I already started to feel guilty about that. So when I had her, I started to feel guilty, like perhaps I'm just not very nurturing as a mom, which was, it makes me feel sad to think of that, but that's the way I started to think about myself. My daughter was pretty healthy, but we found out she had some underlying issues, which would mean she just didn't sleep. She was really, really screaming all the time. I know a lot of newborns don't sleep, but this was just extreme. And I did feel really low, but I guess I had nothing to compare it to. I'd never been a parent before. I was like, maybe this is just what it's like. I'm sleep deprived, all of that sort of thing. So I remember one day, I was just really, really low. And I felt, which it sounds interesting to say it now, but I was desperate to have a shower. When you're a new mom, it's like these little luxuries in life, they're not even luxuries. Well, they're essentials, but they become a luxury, I guess. And I called my mom because I was in a bit of a state of panic. I wanted a shower. I felt too stressed to leave my little girl alone for 5 minutes while I went in the shower. And my mom, because she's amazing, showed up at my front door. And I remember where I was sat in the chair. And she walked in the house and she was like, well, you know, she was being kind about it, but she was trying to ask, why couldn't you just get in the shower? And I said, well, I just can't. And I was just sobbing. And I didn't think much of it because this is the way I'd been kind of 3 or 4 months. And there'd been a lot going on. So I don't know. I wasn't cognizant of it, but I was sat in the chair crying. And she kind of kindly said to me, like, I don't think you're okay. I don't think you're yourself. And that led to a conversation of her saying, why don't you try and get a doctor's appointment this afternoon? Maybe just go and see if you're okay. And she didn't out and out say, I think you've got postnatal depression and anxiety, but she noticed I was not myself. I was like a shell of my former self. And again, I said my mind's been an interesting place, but naturally I'm quite confident, courageous, risk-taking, as I said, a bit of a helper, always there for other people, not feeling like I needed that help. So that was it wasn't the start, but it's the start of me being aware, I'm on a bit of a difficult journey here.
Wow.
Now.
Okay, so it's a really specific thing that kind of started that. What about you, Imelda? Tell us about like the events surrounding your struggle with your mental health.
For me, it was loss, losing 2 loved ones, losing my dad to cancer and losing my fiancé a few months after that. He didn't die, he just left. So I think with my dad, there was grieving before the loss, because with cancer, you know it's terminal. So you know that it's going to end. You just have to wait for however long it takes. So going through that process, being the only child left at home with my mum, And pretty much we were his primary carers. It was a lot for me because my dad was the strongest person I knew. And just seeing him in such a vulnerable state, just this disease eating at him every day for a couple of years. And we had surgery. It was taken out, but then it came back viciously, as cancer does. So I think with me, generally like you, I'm very strong. I just take things on the chin, you move on. But being the person speaking to oncologists, I didn't know who they were. Like, who's this person constantly on the phone to me telling me all the bad stuff that's going to happen to my dad, preparing me for the worst, filling out forms I never thought I'd have to fill out in my life, talking to my mum, explaining what's to come. It was a lot. And I just found that I wasn't coping. I was shutting down. I was lashing out. I think anger was the one thing that manifested in my process of dealing with stuff. I was very angry, and I'm not an angry person. I'm quite a cheerful person. So realizing this anger and not finding out or figuring out where it was from, I remember my partner at the time saying to me, I think you need to speak to someone. I don't know if he was as soft as your mum, but he just did say it because he was getting a lot. And it's like, but I know you, I know who I'm with, and you're not this person. But we didn't know, dealing with what was happening with my dad and just the atmosphere at home and being in lockdown, that compounded everything. So that spurred me into seeking for the right therapist and starting therapy, because I just realized my mental health was just experiencing something I didn't know what, but it felt foreign, and I needed to know what it was and where it was from. So, yeah.
You also said that you lost your fiancé, that relationship broke down.
Yes, it did. About 6 months after my dad passed. He decided he didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. So I think processing that loss without closure just kind of meant I had to have closure in no closure, so to speak. And while I was still trying to understand and process the grief from losing my dad, having prayed for 3 years for his healing, it was a lot. And I think that sent me into an even darker hole than I wanted to admit, because I just felt like I was letting everyone down. I felt like a failure. I felt like my prayers weren't touching heaven anymore, because how could I pray and my dad still dies? How could I be covering my relationship and that still just diminishes without explanation? So it was going through the season of processing the loss of the two most important men in my life and having a lot of questions with no answers. Yeah. It was a lot.
That is a lot. You mentioned like lots of emotions. You felt anger being one of them. Yeah. What were like the main emotions that kind of defined that time for you?
There was a lot of self-blame. There was a lot of disappointment. I think disappointment was a big one, because God is merciful, but I felt so let down by him. I felt really disappointed by him, because I thought, why would you put me through this? It's okay. Well, it's not okay, but it's one thing losing your dad from cancer and illness, you know they're going to die. But it's another thing losing something that you thought was good and was great, and we were planning a wedding. So all of that was happening, and that was going to be the light at the end of the tunnel from the loss of my dad. And then that goes. And it's like, God, where are you? I just felt so alone. I felt lonely and alone, because they're two different feelings, and I felt both. I felt disappointed. I felt angry. I felt very insecure as well. So I shut myself off, because I didn't want to be that person who just carried this dark cloud around, because I was going through so much and there was nothing to be happy about. So I couldn't be happy. I couldn't be with my friends who were always happy. I just felt like me in my room, not showering for days, so I hear that. Not eating. I lost a lot of weight as well. Felt sick a few times as well. And I couldn't be there for my mum. She's grieving her husband, but I can't be there for you, because I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to make it at this point. A lot of emotions to process, yeah.
Rachel, what about you? Obviously, you just had your baby, then a few months in after that.
So there was joy. Like,
Yes,
there were
it was
in the
complex,
middle of,
isn't it?
yeah, that's why it's complicated. And obviously we have different stories, Imelda, but just like relating to some of those challenges in terms of the impact on your mental and emotional health. So there was joy for me at that time, but it was just overshadowed by anxiety, really. I don't know if you would say anxiety is an emotion. I guess it is, but feelings of anxiety, sadness in that I thought this is something I should be really like loving and enjoying in terms of my time off. I'd taken maternity leave. I deeply loved my daughter, but I feel like I was lacking a connection with her, which I think can be quite common in postnatal depression as well. But again, I'd never been through this. So I was just like, what are these feelings? I felt a lot of self-pity, which again, it's in my personality I'm not throwing pity parties all the time, but I was, because I think I was so trapped in my own situation. I could only see really how I was feeling, and I'd become a little bit blinkered. And again, I look back on that and think that I wasn't well. Actually, that's why. But again, it's so different to my personality that I didn't know what to do with the feelings. I've probably always been a bit of an overthinker, but I've never described myself as anxious. And all of a sudden I started having anxious feelings, like whether that was, is there something wrong with my daughter? Or I can't take her out by myself. I can't leave her while I go to the shower. Is something going to happen to her? It was a constant, anxiety was the standout.
How would you explain the difference between overthinking and anxiety?
I don't know if I've thought of it to that level. For me...
Or in your experience, how did you know, I'm not just overthinking, this is more
because than that? I think at the time I didn't, until someone pointed it out to me. I probably did. I didn't even think that I was overthinking. I didn't know what to compare it to. It was probably when my mum was like, she didn't say this isn't normal, but she was like, this is a lot. Like, you're not yourself, you're not well. I suppose that's how I knew the difference. Like, I can overthink and I think in real great detail about things. Say that can be a great strength. Because you kind of go somewhere with your thoughts. That can be a strength. But for me, the opposing thing of that is that it's something that I have to keep in check. And when I wasn't well, the anxiety is then, I guess your physical response to that is, even just feeling lightheaded, and these things I wasn't used to. My heartbeat going really quickly, eventually leading to things like panic attacks. But that was the difference for me. It's kind of, this has crossed a line into, I've got basically fear. I suppose fear is actually what drives anxiety as well. So then those anxious feelings were causing me to act in a certain way. You saying, Imelda, about anger. Yeah, I actually think down within me there was anger too. You saying about lashing out. I don't know that I was always lashing out, but I was I think deep down I was angry, but I don't even know why was I angry. Was I angry at God? Was I angry about the situation? I was probably angry that, like, why are all these things happening at once instead of, like, at least spread out over maybe 3 years? I was like, and I wasn't thinking rationally about things.
Yeah. Obviously that then has an impact on the people around you. But you guys have both expressed how it was like turned you inward a bit, like self-pity, or you felt lonely and loneliness. What about then opening up and asking for support? Like, how did that come about? You said your mum was the first person to almost mention it.
I think my therapist helped. I love her so much because I'm culturally, so in the Nigerian community, this is not for everybody, but just my experience, culturally, you're raised to be strong, and asking for help isn't really a thing. So maybe I can only speak for myself. I know my dad always wanted boys and he had 3 girls. So he raised us all like men. So self-sufficient, never needing anybody, be very accomplished, just be your own person and don't rely on anyone else. boy, was that wrong. But anyways, growing up like that, it meant asking for help was foreign to me. You could ask me for help. I'm the helper, I'll always help you. But to ask for help, it meant I was doing something wrong. So it was so foreign to me. And that's why I became very insular, because it's like, well, I have to deal with this myself. I have to bring myself out of this. I have to find a solution by myself. But thankfully, my partner at the time suggested therapy, and my therapist was a saint. I thought, why are you so nice? Because I grew up with tough love and, you know, you just snap out of it and keep it moving because life isn't waiting for you. And she was just this voice of calmness. She was this reassuring voice. She was this gentle voice that was always speaking life into me and telling me to take time. It's okay to take time. It's okay to pause. It's okay to say no. I struggled with saying no because you just have to be strong for everybody. It's okay to not help your mum grieve and focus on yourself. It's not selfish. I thought that was selfish. I said, but how could I do that? Like, she's depending on me. Who's going to help her?
How did you do that then?
I learned how to say no. I prayed for her more than I supported her personally, because at some point I couldn't be at home anymore. I had to go stay with a friend just because my dad passed at home. It was just a very sad place that I didn't want to be in. I thought we have to have a lot of renovations before I can come here, because the trauma of that was just sitting with me. I couldn't go into his room because that's where he passed. And I felt so guilty because she had to be there. My mum had to still stay in the same bed, wake up in the same space. So I felt like I was being selfish. I felt like I was letting her down. I felt like I was letting myself down. But my therapist just reassured me that self-care wasn't selfish. And if I didn't look after myself, I had nothing to give, because you can't give from an empty cup. So I had to find a way to fill myself back up, and then I could pour into her. It was a long journey.
Rachel, what about you? How did you pour back into yourself and, you know, using your support system around you? Is that a way that helped you?
Yeah, massively. So, I mean, I think phase one was my mum highlighting that. And so beyond that, I did go to see the doctor, and I was like, what are they going to say or do? Again, it was foreign territory to me. And actually the doctor that I just went to see was like, well, how do you think we can help? I was thinking, I thought you were going to give me an answer. That's why I'm here. But he was like, well, you know, here are your options. There's medication, there's talking therapy. And again, for me, I didn't take medication, but that's not to say I don't think it's important. I think there's very different situations. I decided there are so many things on my plate at the minute that are beyond just me maybe having depression and anxiety at that point, that I was like, I don't want to further complicate things by trying different medications members of my family have, and I've seen that go really well and not so well. I just thought, I can't cope with another significant change emotionally, I think, and mentally. So I was like, okay, I'll see how I get on, and I'll try talking therapy. And he referred me to CBT, which for me was really helpful. So just the premise of it essentially is this is what my therapist did with me. You would share a fear, and they would almost get you to disprove it. It sounds crazy, but it really helped me, because mine was I was so anxiety driven at the time. I wouldn't do everything because I was like, if I do this, this will happen. If I take my daughter there, this will happen. It was always negative. So they help you to try out a situation and see, is what you believed really the truth?
Yeah, okay.
Now that was really helpful for a time. I did move into therapy as well, where I had a therapist, a counsellor who, it's like you say, you're saying I just love my therapist. Like for me, it was a male actually. He was incredible. I actually went to see him for like nearly a year. Because I realised when I was there, and I'd had therapy before as well, but I had so much guilt and shame of just like, I'm not a good parent. And that was something that I was like, this is just a belief that I'm holding as well. I'm not a good mom, I'm not the right fit, I'm not nurturing enough. I think that's the other thing. I am a big sister. I love people, but I don't know that I'm always nurturing, because I just don't know if I fit this mold. On top of already feeling not great anyway, I've got these beliefs that are feeding a lie, which are actually keeping me where I am in depression, in a lot of anxiety. So those were really helpful things. And then I feel I did have incredible support. So I'm a church leader, so that was another thing for me. Again, used to being the helper, used to helping other people who were struggling with their mental health, not having a problem with that, but thinking, that's okay, because I'm sat in this seat. So me being in a seat where I don't want to show up to like a Sunday gathering, which of course, it was fine for me not to do that, but I just used to think, if people see me where I'm at now, I'm different to what I normally was. I can't be what everybody thinks I'm going to be or expects me to be. So that caused me to feel anxious, like, what's everybody else thinking? And the amazing thing is that people weren't thinking that. And there were just some incredible people in the church who, they never made a fuss that I wasn't 100% myself, because socially, I wasn't really up for conversations. I would come and go. I was off the grid. I wouldn't reply to people's messages because I became insular. I was trying to cope with what I had on my plate at that moment. But some people had seen me, and I guess just like a gentle touch on the arm, like, oh, I'm praying for you. I know sometimes people say that and you're just like, great, like, how patronizing. But yeah, thanks, that's going to fix everything. But no, but there was a real genuine, I could say, it's almost like when you know someone's not okay, but it's not really the right thing always to go to them and be like, are you okay? What's going on? Because some of these people, they didn't know me that well, but just that love and respect of, I see you, like, I know you're not okay. And actually, that's okay. Because I didn't think it was okay. And no one was trying to smooth it over and be like, do this and you'll be fine. So I feel actually without that kind of support, I would have struggled. And even my husband, even though he was really very practical, very helpful and supportive, you saying, Imelda, about just feeling, I don't know, you saying about that difference between being lonely and alone. I felt in my struggles with my mental health, I felt very isolated, but it's not because nobody tried to help me or because there wasn't anybody there. I felt in my own, I still don't know what that was about, because I can see that people tried to reach out to me, but I felt really alone.
I think with me, I had to shut people out. Yeah. Just because I was receiving a lot of toxic positivity, and that's a thing that people are not aware of, because it's coming from a good place, but it's so unhelpful. I know everything's going to be okay. I don't need you to tell me. Whatever scripture you're going to read to me, I already know, but it's not resonating with me right now. So I had to actually not go to church. I stopped going to church. I didn't want to be around people. I wasn't looking myself. I didn't want to get questions. I didn't want to get the pat on the shoulder. It's going to be okay. I was also a team leader in church of multiple groups, actually. And I just felt like a failure. I felt like I was letting everyone down because I couldn't even lead my own life. So becoming insular and lonely was a bit of my doing as well, because I didn't leave room for anyone to actually give, because giving was so foreign. I was used to giving and I wasn't used to receiving. And the one time I maybe opened up, it was all toxic, like, you just have to get over it, he's gone now. And I thought, okay, I'm going to deal with this on my own. So my depression led to anxiety, where for you, I think it was more your anxiety leading to depression. And that's interesting, because they're cousins, they come with each other. So when you get one, you're bound to spiral into the other one. And now you're fighting almost two demons at the same time. It's a lot. It takes a lot.
What about God? Like, how does he fit into your experience, and what sort of questions were you throwing at him? You said that your therapist was a saint. Where did, how did that? Yeah.
She was. I think God is so intentional because he knows us. He created us. You know, the Bible says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you.
Yeah.
And he knows how stubborn I am as well. So he just knew that the only person that could get through to me was probably my therapist. And I picked her prayerful as well. I made sure I picked a Christian therapist because that was important to me.
How do you pick a good therapist?
So there's a Christian body of therapists. And I picked one from that list or the website. And I remember praying, saying, God, I just need to pick someone who gets me. Because I really wanted someone to get me. Because in that moment, you just want to be held the right way, but you don't know how. So you can't communicate to someone, this is what I need. So I just needed her to know. And I think God was intentional because he gave me the right kind of person, where my actual mother was very tough-lovey, not in a bad way, because it's given me some strength, but I also needed that saintly voice, that gentle voice, in that it's okay. And she was my community. She became my community. She became the person who just held my hand through the journey, because I was angry at God. See, that anger came back, and now it was directed at God, because it was like, God, you've always been there through everything. I've been through so much in the past, and you've come through. Why take my dad? There was a lot of whys. Why didn't you heal him? Why did he have surgery and not come out okay? Why did we spend all that money? Because we had to go private in lockdown because hospitals weren't taking in patients. So why spend 23 grand and he still dies? Why be in debt? There's so many whys. And I felt like my heart and my mind was just in overdrive. So I wasn't hearing from God. And he was definitely speaking. So even though you're not hearing from him, God's always speaking, but he's also gentle. He wouldn't force his way back in. And he was speaking through my therapist. So she would pray with me at the end of every session. She would encourage me, but back it up with scripture as well. So it was a bit of faith walk and the word hand in hand. So exercising out my faith, not just, this is the scripture, just run with it. It's like, these are practical ways to walk out that faith, you know. And I think for a while, I couldn't pray. For a long while. I couldn't pray. If people were praying, I would walk away. Sometimes if anyone called me to pray for me, I'd leave the phone and just walk away because I felt so let down. Obviously now I had to repent because I knew that was all just my emotions, being overwhelmed, you know, just being anxious about everything, even thinking God had failed me. Like, okay, if my earthly father goes, well, God, you're going to go because I'm disappointing you feeling this way anyway. My brain was in overdrive, but to answer your question, I was low-key angry at God. Because I had questions and I didn't have answers.
I was just going to say, Imelda, on that, you know, sometimes we talk about you're saying about how like God's come through for you all these times, and then you're like, so why not do it again? And I think sometimes we think, okay, it's okay, we can just remember the times God's come through and that'll give us faith.
It'll keep you going.
Yeah, but then sometimes it's like, but I know what you can do, so why is he not doing it right now? It can have the other effect. And I think that was the same for me. I wouldn't say I had a faith crisis. I've had other faith crises in my life, and I have. But for where I was at, it was a little bit of what you're saying. It's like, God, I know what you can do. I've seen you heal people. I've seen you break through in really difficult situations. I know that about you. This isn't something that someone else is telling me. I've experienced that personally. So I think for me, I felt like I was I was definitely in survival mode, but I was also in constant fight mode. Like I felt like I always, even as I started to get some really helpful tools for sorting my thoughts out, and even from scripture, thinking about how do we renew our mind? How do we take something that's incorrect and replace it with the truth, essentially? And a lot of good therapists understand the mechanics of how we do that and how our brain does that too. But that's what I struggled with. And it wasn't so much that I was like, I wasn't like I thought, God, I'm having a crisis. It was more just, okay, so I know what you can do. So I don't really understand why you're not doing it. And is there something I'm doing wrong? Or have I not
self-blame?
So I think it's so important that it can have the other effect in a difficult, especially when with our mental health, we're like, oh God, you've been there before. But then you're like, yeah, exactly. So
why not now?
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Ruth and I'm the CEO and founder of Magnify.
And I'm Rachel and I'm the host of the Magnify Conversations.
This November, we're launching our first ever giving campaign. As a non-profit organisation, we're so grateful for the generous donations we receive, which enable us to serve and impact so many women around the world.
We've been blown away by the impact of the Magnify Conversations this year. In August alone, we'd reached 100,000 views on YouTube, that's of the Magnify Conversations, and we'd hit 10,000 subscribers. And we can see those numbers translating into impact through the stories of women that are getting in contact with us.
And we're so excited to continue to deepen our impact. And we're grateful for our generous donors who support us in all that we do. So this November, for every £1 given, they will be doubling it. Meaning if you give £10 to Magnify, Magnify will receive £20, which will help us towards production costs.
We want to see our impact grow and deepen for the sake of the gospel to reach more women. And with your help, we will be able to do that. The best way you can support us is by giving financially in November, and we welcome your generous gift.
Because you guys have both expressed how you lost your dad, you lost your fiance, you lost your maternity leave and almost a bit of the joy of that. What do you think about like how God restores? I think there's a verse in scripture that said he'll restore the years that the locusts have eaten. Yeah. How does that sit when you've been through such a period of loss?
There's a version of that says he'll compensate you for the years the locusts and the cankerworms have eaten. And I think for me, how I experience God's restoration now, almost 2 years later, is I have a joy that I can't explain. I have a peace that I can't explain either. And I try, because I'm very rational. I try to be like, okay, this is the source of my peace, but it's him. Yeah. It's always been him. He's restored my peace, because when you go through a mental health crisis, there's no peace. You don't have any peace in your mind. You don't have any peace in your heart. There's just chaos in your inner mind and in your internal world. But I have peace. So when problems come now, I'm still calm because I know who I'm anchored to. And we've moved past our issues. We've settled now. Me and God, we're back in great terms. And I think he's just revealing himself to me now as Abba, because I don't have my earthly father anymore. So he's all I have, and I'm knowing him as Abba. And I think that just brings me peace. So he's restored my mind, but I have to do the work of renewing it, because with God is partnership. He doesn't just give and do, and you don't do anything. You just wake up and be. You have to take action steps. So he's given me that peace, but in order to tap into it, I have to renew my mind daily. I have to stay in the Word. I have to go back to church. I have to stay surrounded by the right community, be open and receptive to prayer. I like who he's making me now, because there's a transformation process that the grief and loss has taken me through, and I'm just open and completely surrendered to this new me.
I'd love you to talk a bit more about how you've been through that restoration process, but without your dad being present. Can you talk a bit more about that, if you can?
I'm going to try not to cry. My dad was very wise. He was that guy. He was a sound man. He wasn't saved. He got saved just before he passed, praise God. But for the most part, he was one of those wise people that you just couldn't get through because they knew it all. I think the one thing that made me just really miss and really feel the loss was grieving the loss of my relationship without him. That was incredibly difficult, because as a man, you would go to your dad naturally. I wouldn't really go to my mom. I'd go to my dad to try and understand where the other male in my life was coming from. And just knowing my dad and his nature, I knew the things that he would say, how he would reassure me without being too mushy, but just be wise about it and practical. He was very practical. So it was tough because it's like, God, now you've stepped into the Abba role, but I can't hear you because my mind is clustered, my heart is clustered, I'm overthinking, I'm anxious. So how am I getting through this? And I remember just crying to a picture of my dad at one time saying, how could you leave? So now I shifted my anger from God to my dad. Like he didn't fight enough to stay. And I think getting through it was just me leaning more into the word and hearing God's voice as Abba. Because I can't tell you if I've even processed it properly or gone through it properly, but I know, especially the scripture that says he's close to the brokenhearted and he binds their wounds. And I had to get to a place of surrender with God so that he could bind my wounds, so that he could make my heart whole again. So that when dad isn't there for me to get the wise words and the tough love, I know that I could read the word and be accepting to what I'm reading because now my heart was open to Abba. I think it's still a process for me, if I'm honest. It is
ongoing.
Yeah, it is ongoing, but we're getting there.
What about you, Rachel? How did you feel the loss? And
I mean, it was different for me, Imelda, and obviously I'm grieving a loss of time, I guess, not a person. So it's a different kind of loss, different kind of grief. And like I say, there was joy. There was joy in that time. It's obviously very different for you. But yeah, I think now when I look back and just thinking back to what you were saying, Abi, about like what the locusts have eaten, I can't ever reclaim back that time. And I suppose I've kind of had to just accept that time as gone. And I say that because I can't remember. It's strange. I don't know why. I think just through going through depression and anxiety and being in a really dark place, I actually blacked out a whole time. I don't know why I can't have the same memories that I had before. So I suppose I grieve that. And what does restoration look like? Similar to Imelda, like this, I think there can be peace. I can't get that time back. But the amazing thing is, I do have my daughter, right? And with a sound mind now and being mentally a lot more healthy than I was, not that that was my fault, or not that it's our fault sometimes. We just get in that place. That's what it is through life and circumstances. Now, I suppose I think, you know what, I'm not going to get that time back, but perhaps restoration is different. Perhaps that's me now looking at my relationship with my daughter. She's my eldest child, and being like, I've got this time now. I also don't want to sit and I did for a time. I just kept looking back at like, I've lost that. I feel really sad that I didn't have that. I felt angry at myself that I hated being on maternity leave because I used to look back a lot. I think for me that restoration is going, do you know what, that it was the darkest time for me in my life so far. I'm sure there'll be dark times to come as well, but going through that, and some of that restoration has been God showing me actually seasons come and go as well. That for me it was a season. It was hard, but the reliance I had to have on God in that time, it was non-linear. It wasn't always like, God, thanks for being there for me. Sometimes it was like, God, where are you? I feel like I'm in a fight. Am I always going to have to try this hard to work on myself and my mental health? But now I kind of look back and go, okay, I don't know if it's thank you for that time. I'm not sure I'm at thank you. But I think it's going, that's been and it's gone. And restoration is, actually, I have my daughter there, and now it's here and now. Like, how do I build a relationship with her that I didn't have then?
Did you guys ever feel like, oh my goodness, am I ever going to be mentally healthy again? Is this just who I am now? Is this going to go on forever? Like, did that ever cross your mind during that time?
That was a daily thing where it's like, this is me now. I've become that person. What person though? Do you know what I mean? I think I also for a long time felt a lot of shame about being in therapy, so I wouldn't share that I was in therapy because I shared it with my mom, and she thought, but what's wrong with you? And I thought, well, am I actually crazy? Because, you know, you have to be crazy to be in therapy. Such a lie. So there was a lot of shame, and I just thought, maybe this is me now. Maybe I'm just an angry person now. Maybe I'm just a sad person now, so I'm just not going to be around people. And then I started convincing myself that I function on my own anyway. I function best on my own. I don't need people around me. And I think I started to push my ex away as well, just because I felt a lot of shame. So I thought, well, at least my therapy likes me and paying her to like me, so she better like me. But yeah, there was daily thoughts of this is me now, so let me start accepting this version of me. But thank God he showed me that that wasn't me, because he didn't create me to be angry. He didn't create me to be sad. He created me to bask in the fullness of who he is. He created me to have the fruits of the Spirit, and they were going to become evident in my life at some point. I didn't know how long it was going to take. It's still a process. But it was a daily battle of renewing of the mind, like you mentioned, Rachel, because it's so easy to have your negative thoughts intensified when you're depressed. Every negative thing you think about just becomes bigger, and it sits there, and you magnify it. And if you're an overthinker like we are, you're just that person. I'm just now a depressed person. Then you label yourself these things, and you start to walk in that. So there was a lot of unlearning that had to happen. A lot to just kind of strip myself from being that person, or accepting this new dark place and thinking this is me now.
I think for me, there was so much about the language of that, you know, and like making that your now identity. And for me, I struggled for a while not to think when, because I thought, when is this going to end? But I was also like, I feel like I'm trying really hard as well. But some of it's working. I can see some fruit, but it's a long, like, uphill struggle. And I would probably slip in and out of this, but I tried not to say, like, my depression, my anxiety. And I still would say that, because I was thinking, like, it's almost like it belongs to me. And in a way, I was like, okay, it's part of me for now. But I never wanted to make it my identity, even though, like, at the time, basically, it was a little bit.
That's really, can you talk more into that like day-to-day mindset, like living in that context?
I know it's only, I know they're only words, but I suppose words are important to me, and the way that I describe things, or for me, the way I processed that internally to think, like, I had depression and anxiety, right? I wasn't trying to ignore it. I was having mentally one of the darkest times of my life, because there was, like, just after having my daughter, but really it'd gone on for a year and a half, that I was feeling, things were very, very up and down, and mainly down in that time. Had some great help, had great support, but it was dark. So for me to start to learn as part of, like, I guess my process of through therapy and other things, I was like, I don't want to personify these things. They don't belong to me. I may be, like, battling with them for a season. And I know for some people this is just semantics, it's just wordplay, but for me it was an intentional step for me not to be like, my depression, my anxiety, because I was already fighting to move through that time, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, because sometimes we're dealing with a circumstance and it's kind of happening to us, and we're learning to manage it more than just, if I work hard enough, I can break my way through this, which has probably been my mentality for life till this happened. And then I was like, oh, no, that's not always how it works. Another thing that I was thinking about when you were sharing, Imelda, like, do you feel, you know, you're always going to be stuck there? I had hope, a little bit of hope that I wouldn't be, but it's like, you know, if you've ever done, like, a high intensity workout, it's for, like, 20 I
was like, oh, no.
Well, it's like 20 to 25 minutes all in, like, every movement is strong. It's high intensity. That's what it is. You don't really do high intensity for an hour, probably, unless you're a professional athlete. It's not designed to be that way. It's intense for short periods. And I felt like I was learning all these great tools to help me with my thinking and my mindset, which were, I guess, leading me towards some kind of healing. Trying to trust God in the middle of that too, believing that He can bring restoration too, but I'm going to do my part, and I can do what I can do. It felt like I was doing a high intensity workout for way longer than I should have been. So I think I just thought, I don't think I can be this aware of my thoughts at this intense level for all this time. So if you both saying you've never done high intensity workouts, but when you're in the middle of one, you come into the end, you're like, yes, I get a break now.
Yes.
I felt like, am I ever going to get a break from this? So even when I've come through anxiety, depression, everything else, these thoughts that I'm feeling, these trains of thought that I'm getting onto, is there ever going to be a day where I can just wake up and think, I don't have to have this level of like a magnify on my thoughts all the time, because I felt like I had to be so self-aware. What's the word? Hypervigilant. I was so hypervigilant about the way I was thinking, how people were perceiving me, what I was doing, and some of that helped me. The weird thing is, some of that helped me to get a bit better and push through. But then I just thought, I don't have this much energy to keep going like month after month after month after month. So in some ways I thought, is that ever going to end?
There's a lot of strength in that, funny enough, because I feel like even you having that glimmer of hope, even though it didn't seem like it at the time, it still seemed like you had some level of hope with me, because it was like compounded loss. And I had to grieve multiple things at once. I just kind of gave up. And that kind of led me into what was the darkest part of this whole thing for me, where I called up a friend and I said, I don't want to be here anymore. And I remember where I was. I remember how I was that day. I hadn't left my house in days. And I just remember calling him saying, I just wanted to end. And I think I want to end it. And what was funny about that is, because even though I thought I wasn't hearing from God and God, where are you? There was an inkling, a gut feeling to call him. He's not even one of my best friends. I was thinking, why him? I've got a partner. Why am I not calling him? Call him, call him. So I called him. And interestingly enough, he gave out a big sigh. And he said, Imelda, I've been exactly where you are. And that was how I knew God was still with me, because he had put it, I mean, it's gut feeling, but it's essentially the Holy Spirit. And he made me call this friend, because this friend had been where I was. If I had spoken to anyone else, there could have been toxic positivity. Oh my God, I'm coming over, let me help you. But he had walked in the shoes just months before. And he was able to pray with me, first of all, and then talk me through how he came out of it.
Wow.
And that was what I needed in that moment. I never felt suicidal. I thought, oh my gosh, but you have to be a certain level of crazy, excuse me for saying, but that's what you think until it happens to you, where you're like, I have no hope. I think this is me, and this cannot be me, because this is not Imelda. So I wanted to end. Let me just go be with Abba at this point. It was dark. It was very dark.
So then, how did you move through that process of healing? And because it's painful and it's difficult. So what was your experience of that?
I think the first thing in the process was identifying this is where I'm at, which I was shying away from, because in the Black community, why are you suicidal? What, you've got everything. I had so much to be thankful for, and I was reminded daily that you have a lot to be thankful for. What are you depressed about? So I had to accept that I am depressed and I am suicidal. Accepting that was hard. Thinking back, it was hard. But that's the first step to processing, because if you don't identify or name it, you can't deal with it. So identifying it helped me start the process of, why am I feeling this way? This was all through therapy. I couldn't do it on my own. So why are you feeling this way? What are the lies that you've told yourself that have now magnified in your mind to think, you're such a failure, just end it now? What voices are you listening to? And why aren't you plugged in to the right voice? So that was one of the many ways. There were a lot of processes, a lot of tools, but I think ultimately God did the healing. That's the truth. It's easy to say, well, there was the meditation and the breathing and the eating right and the taking your D3, because that helps with your mental health, and the going for long walks, and all of these things were great.
They're good.
Absolutely. But ultimately, I think God does the healing, because what happens when you don't go on a walk? What happens if you don't feel like taking your D3? What happens when you stop meditating? Do you then go back to square one? So it's like, that's why I think it's collaborative. It's hand in hand with God and the tools from my therapist that kind of got me here.
Amazing.
What about you, Rachel? About that healing journey? What was your experience?
Yeah, it wasn't straightforward. So I can't remember. I kind of remember coming to a point where I was like, I feel like I'm not fighting as hard as I used to, rather than, one day I woke up and everything was okay. And so much like you, Imelda, those building blocks of health, fresh air, vitamin D3, eating well, writing things down.
Journaling,
writing prayers down sometimes, because it's like I didn't want to, but also I didn't have the words to pray, but I picked up a pen, take my time. That was a prayer. All those different things, like I guess trying to practice gratitude, like they're kind of building blocks, and they were really helpful to me, being honest. I guess like analysing my thoughts, like what's right and what's not. But that sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but if you just keep thinking something, you're kind of like, what's right and what's not. All of those things help me. But ultimately, I think for me, it was a combination of people loving me as I was at that time. Which sounds like, well, why, were your family or your friends, why wouldn't we love you? But for me, again, I was like, well, I guess maybe that's a lie, that I believe that you love me because I'm this certain way. Or,
and you're feeling so much shame around it, so that it's harder than to believe.
So I think just people being there. Also, when I wasn't always treating them right.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't. I was angry. I was bitter. I could be a little bit selfish sometimes, because I had to be. I think maybe selfish isn't the right word, but I was very self-focused at that time. And I wasn't trying to be selfish, but of course, sometimes with your closest relationships, you are
trying to get better.
You lash out. You're trying to get better. You can be very self-centered at times. I certainly was. So I think people loving me through that showed me the goodness of God too. You were saying about like your friend that was there on the other end of the call, and you feel like God was helping you, is giving you hope in that moment. My experience was God was using also other people to love me at that time. And it's not that he didn't, it's just in the most practical, tangible ways. So one thing that I remember on that healing journey was, because I had social anxiety, a friend that I'm not even that close to, she said, do you want to go out for a coffee? And I was trying to make myself go out more, because that's something I did not want to do. It's almost like I needed people, but I isolated myself. I did the opposite. And I kept doing this thing where I would arrange something, and literally at half an hour before I'd be like, I literally can't do this. And I'd done this with the same friend before. Half an hour before, I just thought, I can't do this today, but I'd arranged it. She didn't live close, so she was driving from a different location. But I messaged her and I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. I just can't do this today. She knew I wasn't well, but I still thought like, oh, this is going to wear thin on the kind of friendship that we have. And she just messaged me back saying, do you know what? It's okay. Let's do it another time. And I was like, right, okay. It was a bit of a relief to me. And then I guess another half an hour later, I looked at my phone and she'd messaged me just saying, I've left a few things on your doorstep, didn't want to knock. And she'd gone around the corner to a really nice bakery. She'd picked up like something to eat and a coffee and left it at my door. No expectation, no like passive aggressive, like we'll do it another time. And to me, I know that it's such a small thing, but it was a real act of kindness to me, because I just thought, I'm wretched. Like if I was my friend at the minute,
I wouldn't be.
Even though I'm not well, I'd just feel like this is getting a bit annoying now. Like you're saying this is wearing a bit thin. But so acts like that were huge for me. And then just in the middle of it, knowing one thing I'd say that always gave me hope was I knew God had never left me. In the Bible it talks about God will never leave us or forsake us. That was like I didn't know when I was going to get better. I didn't know if I was going to have any restoration, but I knew, God, you're never going to leave me. And I took comfort in that. So even when I was having my worst moments and like some really dark moments like you're describing, I was like, literally everything's wrong, but God, you've not left me. That was like even that tiny bit of hope. That was a huge part of my healing journey.
What are some of the mindsets or the beliefs that you felt like you had to learn or unlearn in this, like in the healing journey?
I've had to learn a few things and unlearn a few things as well. But I think one of the things I've learned is that it's okay to take as much time as I need, because healing's not a destination, it's a journey. It's not an event that you just jump into. So however long it takes is how long it takes. I've also had to learn it's okay to not always be strong and resilient, which kind of leads into just asking for help, because like us, we're used to being the pillar of support for so many people that when it happens to us, we think we have to bounce back immediately. But it's okay to not bounce back immediately. It's okay to just wait for God to do what he needs to do in however long he needs to do it. I've also had to unlearn that being in therapy is a bad thing, or you need to only be in therapy when you're going through a breakdown. For me, it's a lifestyle now. I just like, you need the gym to stay fit and you need to eat right to stay healthy. I think therapy for me is just fitness of the mind at this point. So, and that's okay. Yeah.
Rich, what about you?
Yeah, the big thing I had, there were many things I had to unlearn. Right. The big thing for me was that the people around me don't love me for my strength and things like that I thought, they like me because I can provide for them in some way. That clearly, that must have been a belief I had, because the minute I wasn't well, I was like, I don't have that anymore, so I'm almost an annoyance or a burden to people. Interestingly enough, I would never think that about someone else if they came to me. It was like the advice I couldn't take myself. I would tell someone, you're not a burden to me. But the minute I felt like a burden, I was like, I am a burden. So I had to unlearn that, because that must have been a deep-seated belief that I had, that I'd never had to confront really before, because I'd never been in that season before. So I had to unlearn that, because the truth was that people loved me for me. Good, bad, indifferent. And then I had to learn, really similar to you, Imelda, that even having therapy for a season is amazing, but going back not in a crisis point is also incredible. And I've done that since, and it's not always been to do with my mental health journey. It's been able to go and speak privately with someone who has no agenda, no knowledge of me, no thoughts about me and my life, doesn't know me from anybody else, which that level of privacy for me has been life-giving. And just feeling I can show up as I am and say what I'm thinking, what I'm not at a crisis point. I've been to therapy in a crisis point, had to have that. It was like a lifeline. And be able to unpack my thoughts and that be healthy and not feel like, guys, I'm having a really bad time because I'm going to therapy again, but just like, I've got back in touch with my therapist for a couple of sessions because I want to care for my mental health. And I realised, like, say you were saying, Imelda, culturally, that's also not always the done thing or the easy thing to do. So I'm not saying I broadcast that to everyone, but
because therapy is not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. It's not, and it's not the only way to heal or be well.
You're right.
But for me, it was so helpful and part of my healing journey that I've got back in touch with somebody that I've spoken to and being able to just say, hey, I'm struggling a bit with my thoughts, or I would like to just work on this thing. I just want somebody to speak to in a private setting. Okay,
you pay them to listen.
Paying them to be my friend, as you said.
To the women listening to this in our Magnify community, maybe they're going through similar things, maybe they've got close friends or family. What's like one piece of wisdom or encouragement that you would share with them?
Learn to ask for help. I think it's so important to say, I'm not okay, I need help. In a world that needs you to be constantly put together and seen fine, it's okay to say, I'm not fine. So there's a lot to unlearn. I'd say unlearn the things you need to unlearn that don't serve you and learn new habits, one of which will be asking for help. Another one is saying no. It's okay to say, no, I don't want to meet up because I'm not there yet. It's okay to say, no, I can't have you come visit me because I won't be a great host. It's okay to set healthy boundaries that are a way of caring for yourself, and self-care isn't selfish. That's 3 things.
That's
3 gems. It's like, Imelda, I'm trying to think of one thing. I think the thing, the one, if there was one thing, I'm never going to do one thing, am I? But
right?
I think the one thing for me would be No, some people struggle in really severe ways with the mental health for different reasons at different seasons of their life. And I think as a generation, we understand a little bit more that we all have highs and lows in our mental health. And that's actually, that's normal. Yeah. That's okay and that's normal. But I think if you're in a place where that feels like you've got anxiety, but you've decided, I am just my anxiety, is to kind of stop and question it and go, okay, is this just something I need to manage? Sometimes it is. Yeah. Or is it something that I need to take a little deeper look at and maybe see a therapist, or maybe just have a conversation with a trusted friend if you have those trusted friends, or even just to pray, God, can you help me with this? Or begin to write down what's causing this anxiety or what's causing this feeling. I think especially if it's on the back of a really serious life event, is absolutely, I guess the main thing I would say is, ask, don't be afraid to ask for help.
I need help. Yeah. I'm struggling. Yeah. It's okay to say that, I think. Yeah, that's one thing I struggled with. But now I think with the right people, I can be vulnerable, because healing requires a high level of vulnerability. Oh, yeah. And if you're not ready to be vulnerable, how ready are you to heal? You know, so ask for help from the right people, of course. Yeah.
What you've done so well is like hold the complexities of like relationships and self-care, of like being aware of other people, but also putting in boundaries. And I think you've just given so much permission to look after our mental health, not just in times of crisis, but like throughout our day-to-day. How do we like be aware of that and look after ourselves well? So thank you so much for everything that you've shared.
Thank you.
It's been an honour to see Magnify grow to where we are today. If you've loved this conversation and want more from Magnify, why not check out our print magazine?
Across the 10 editions, we've had the privilege of featuring a multiple of changemakers and pioneers such as Suzanne Hendricks, Jerry Lorenzo, Joe Malone, and many more.
The magazine is a beautiful physical product that makes the perfect coffee table companion to complement your space.
And even more than the look, it creates the perfect excuse to take some time to read a collection of timeless features that will enrich your life whatever stage you're at. Head to magnifycollective.com/shop to purchase your copy now.
The Magnify conversations mean so much to us as a team. It really impacts us every day and encourages us so much when we see your comments, your DMs, and to know that these conversations are truly making an impact in the best times of your life, but also challenging, is such an honour. We hope you've enjoyed today, and we can't wait to see you next Monday.